You're listening to Menopause Natural Solutions, episode 93, Water Quality. Welcome to Menopause Natural Solutions, your podcast for all things perimenopause, menopause and beyond. Stay tuned as your host, naturopath Jennifer Harrington, explains how to use natural therapies to find your ultimate health and happiness during your transition. Hello, ladies. And last week we started the conversation. We started talking about the importance of hydration and the importance of having adequate electrolytes. Now, today we're going to continue that conversation because what is more important than the quantity of water is the quality of water that we're drinking. Now, to help me with this conversation is my dear friend, building biologist Joe Leah from No Tox Rocks, who's here to help me. So good morning, Joe.
Hi, Jen. It's lovely to be back. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thanks. Now, ladies, if you're new to the podcast, Jo has been on several times. She was on episode 61 talking about environmental health and episode 77 talking about mold. So if you find this topic interesting today, you may like to go back and listen to those former episodes. So, Jo, why are we even talking about the need to filter water? What are we concerned about?
Well, it's a really interesting topic because I have so many people that I talk to, and I'm so surprised when they just do not filter their water. People here in Sydney or Melbourne, they always say to me, "Oh no, we've got the best, drinking water in the world. We're so lucky. There's no reason to filter your water." And then I always have this conversation with them about, well, yes, it's we're not going to get cholera or dysentery or anything like that from our water, and we're not going to die from it like some people can in third world countries, but we still have a whole lot of contaminants that make it through to our tap water that we're drinking, and they're quite easy to filter them out. So I don't, I think it's just a matter of educating people about what's actually in your water, because why would you take in these extra contaminants and heavy metals and hormone disrupting chemicals when you don't need to, and that's what's in there. That's what's in your water.
Scary stuff. So what are some of the main contaminants that we're trying to avoid?
Well, at the moment, basically all your water, if you're drinking mains water coming from the catchment, you will have chlorine in it or chloramines. Now, chlorine, it's absolutely necessary because that's what's going to kill all the bacteria and viruses, all the living things in there, and it does a very effective job at doing that. But that's chlorine, and that's an antibacterial, and basically, at the very least, you want to get that out of your water because you're drinking that. And we know that our gut bacteria is affected by antibacterials. So why would you drink water, that's going to have chlorine in it? It's really bad for you. And it's very easy to get out of the water. If you were actually to leave, it just dissipates from water. So if you were to leave water standing for 24 hours, the chlorine would evaporate. Now, the problem is because it's a VOC, but these days, in most of the water around, well, certainly around Sydney, they put chloramines in the water. So the further you are away you are from the catchment. So here in Bondi, where I'm over near the water, so I'm as far away at the end of the distribution line as you can get. And so we have chloramines in our water. Now that's far harder to filter out. That's basically a mixture of chlorine and ammonia. And it does make it more effective we do need chloramines because the water's got to travel such a long distance to get to us here, that it's much more effective at getting rid of the disinfection byproducts. So that's why they put that in. But unfortunately, that's very hard to get out of the water. And it's really bad for you. You don't want that in your water. So that's one of the main things that's in our water that should be taken out. Everybody should be getting that out of their water. And, the chlorine is easy to filter. Another thing that they do here in Australia is they fluoridate the water. Now, fluoride, I think I may have even spoken to you about this before, but I have a big issue with fluoride because first of all, it's a neurotoxin. It's a waste product from the phosphate fertilizer industry that they just literally dump into our water supply. under the guise of saying that it makes our teeth stronger and all this nonsense, which it doesn't. There's no proof that systemic intake of fluoride is a benefit to your health or to your teeth in any way. It's added to our water as a medicine, basically, without consent. So they're putting it in there, saying that it's going to make us healthier, stronger teeth, which is nonsense, but they're not asking consent and they're not controlling the dose. So fluoride's in our water. And by the way, 97% of Europe do not fluoridate the water. Most countries don't fluoridate, but we still do. So, and look, if you do think that fluoride is good for your teeth, then use it in your dental products. But there's no need to be drinking it. For example, if a baby gets a dose of, a baby that's bottle fed is going to get about 60% more fluoride per pound of body weight as an adult does, because if they're drinking tap water, if the mum's mixing the tap water with the formula, so they're going to get a much bigger dose than a breastfed baby, and it's just not healthy. We know it's a neurotoxin. We know it lowers IQ. There's been talk about it. It hasn't been proven, but it's associated with osteosarcoma, which is bone cancer, particularly in young males, teenage boys, when they're going through that growth spurt. So there's no reason for it to be in there. And it's a toxic waste product that was deemed too dangerous to be dumped, buried, or they can't get rid of it any other way, really, because it's a toxic waste. So they've decided to just add it to our water.
That is so scary.
I know, it's crazy. And look, there's so much information out there on that. If people want to do a bit more research, I would suggest you go and look at Fluoride Action Network. It's a website, and they have tons of information, really, really great information about fluoride and all the lots of science that's been done on it and all the studies. So definitely a good thing to look at there.
So how do we remove it?
Fluoride is very difficult to remove, and it's really annoying because that's pretty much the main reason why the only filtration method that's going to get rid of fluoride is reverse osmosis or activated alumina. So that's a real pain because, and look, some places do have fluoride occurring naturally in the ground, so they'll also need to use those kind of systems to get rid of the water. To get rid of the fluoride out of the water. Now, the other things that are in our water that you might not have even thought about or know about is pharmaceuticals, for example. So that's a real big problem these days, antibacterials. They've done tests on water, mainly in America, and they've found that in almost every water utility, they've found pharmaceuticals in the water, in tap water. So you are getting, antibacterials. Now, a lot of this stuff is coming from the cattle, the CAFO farms, and from it's in the waste product from the animals, in their urine and feces, and ours, and from flushing things down the toilet. So it all gets in. It doesn't all get filtered out at the catchment. Some of it does. About 50% of these pharmaceuticals will get filtered out, but about 50% don't, and that's getting through to your tap water. So we know about antibacterial resistance, and we do not want to be having very small doses of and it is tiny doses, but it's constant and it's in our water.
Yeah, so definitely don't flush your leftover tablets down the toilet.
Yeah, that's right. But obviously the biggest source of that is going to be from these big farming industries, with all the veterinarian medicines and things like that is going to be the biggest source of that sort of stuff. What else is in our water? Well, then there's pesticides, obviously, all the runoff from agriculture, herbicides, all these things make their way in there. There's heavy metals, PFAS, the perfluorinated chemicals that are a massive problem now, and there's a lot of talk about them now, finally. But they are ubiquitous in the environment, and they're definitely in our water now. And basically, they're in nearly everybody's body on the planet. So we've got to filter our water. We've got to limit our exposure to these things as much as possible, and filtering your water is the easiest way to do it.
Is there anything else in the water?
Yeah, look, you can get, and I know that in Sydney we've had outbreaks of Giardia or Cryptosporidium in the past, and that's when you'll get occasionally, you might get told, oh, everybody boil your water for the next few weeks before you drink it. And that's because there's been some crazy outbreak and it's managed to get through the filtration system. Normally those things are controlled by chlorine or the chloramines, but sometimes they do get out of control. So I'm not as concerned about bacteria and viruses and stuff in water because we do have pretty good disinfection. However, if you're drinking tank water or something like that, then you're definitely going to need to be controlling that yourself. You have to get your own water tests done on your water, just to see what sort of bacteria and viruses are in there. And then, obviously I'd be using UV or something like that in that sort of situation. The glyphosate and atrazine, that's always in our water. Glyphosate is obviously the main component of Roundup. Atrazine is, or was, I think it still might be the most widely used herbicide in the world. And we've heard, you probably remember atrazine. There was a lot of talk about it a decade ago when it turns, frogs into hermaphrodites, when it gets into the lakes, a lot of these issues with these hormone disrupting pesticides that are still not banned. They're just still used constantly. And all that stuff is in your water. So, definitely things that we want to get out of there. Lead. What about lead? I mean, the other thing about water is it's coming through these distribution pipes that were made, over 100 years ago, and they often use lead solder and things like that. So you've got it coming through these pipes for miles and miles and miles, and then it finally gets to your tap, and that's where you're getting sources of lead. Copper's a big one, especially if you go outside and have a look if you've got copper pipes, and when they go all blue and oxidized. So sometimes that can be a real problem as well, and you can have really high levels of that. So yeah, you definitely need to be, even if it's just that, if that's the only thing you're concerned about, that's enough. You need to be getting that out.
So Jo, in the water, is there anything that will affect hormone balance? Any xenoestrogens we should be concerned about?
Yeah, there are lots. And one of the ones that it's getting a lot of attention at the moment is microplastics. So we know that when we wash all our, Lululemon, probably should say any sportswear, our pants, any brand of those, leisure wear, exercise wear, polyesters, all that sort of stuff. Every time you're washing that, little bits of plastic are getting washed away and getting into our waterways. It's ending up in our oceans, and these microplastics are a big deal now in our drinking water too. They're actually in our drinking water. They're also in your bottled water, because when you're getting bottled water, you are basically, most of the time that's just tap water, not always, but sometimes that's just filtered tap water. Now, these microplastics are so tiny that most of the filtration is not going to get them out. Reverse osmosis does. That's going to be your best bet. And also a carbon filter will get it out, but it's got to be sort of less than, or about a 0.5 microns. So we'll talk more about that later, but the micron is how small amount of pollution or contaminant that it's going to get out, and that's really important because there's a big variety of, spectrum of that. So that's important to know. But these microplastics are a massive problem. They are estrogenic. All plastics are pretty much estrogenic, but these microplastics are just a tiny amount, but it's this constant exposure that we have. There's the pharmaceuticals, which are also estrogenic, and the pesticides we know are estrogenic. Atrazine that I just spoke about, glyphosate, and even some of the heavy metals can have problems like that. Fluoride is estrogenic. So all these things, most of the things tend to be, unfortunately, even the PFAS, like the PFOS and the PFOA, they cause massive problems with hormone imbalance. And the thing about fluoride as well, I think we've spoken about this once before, is it has an affinity with the thyroid. So all the halogens, as you know, all those halogens are going to compete and get to the thyroid and cause hormone disrupting problems there. And that's why a lot of these things are called obesogens, because at the end of the day, they can really affect your whole hormonal balance. And cause you to become obese or put on weight, which none of us want in these days.
Copper can also have an estrogenic effect.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, so a lot of these metals do as well. When metals get into the body, they can deposit in the organs or in your bones, and they can replace minerals, and the minerals are what we need. So, yeah, and water, because we have so much of it and we have it every day, it's in everything, it's really important to just make sure that we're drinking clean water.
So maybe we should talk about best filtration methods.
Any filter is better than none. So even if all you can get is a jug filter or a pitcher filter for your table, then it's definitely better than not having a filter at all. It will get out the chlorine and it will get out a lot of the basics. So if that's all you can get, then get it. Ideally, I think particularly if you're just on mains water, probably the best option is a reverse osmosis filter. The problem is a lot of people don't like reverse osmosis because a lot of wastewater is created with that, and it takes everything out of the water. So it's also taking out the good minerals, your natural sort of magnesium and calcium and things like that that are naturally occurring in the water. So if you do get a system like that, it's really important to get a remineralization filter as well. So basically you'll have usually a 4-stage system. So there'll be a sediment filter perhaps, and then some type of carbon filter that's going to take out the chlorine and what have you, because once the chlorine hits the next filter, which would be the reverse osmosis filter, if the chlorine makes it through to there, then that's going to damage the membrane, and you don't want that. So you've got to have at least a 3-stage system for a good reverse osmosis, and then the next filter would be the remineralization filter. At least some of these systems go up to 7 stages. So it is a bit complicated. And look, it's not necessarily the cheapest. It's probably the most expensive option. But if you own your own house and you're in a position to do this and you've got a good enough space under the sink, then that's probably the system that you would go for. But it is important to know what's in your water because it is different all around the world. You might not need that system if you don't have fluoride and you don't have chloramines. You probably don't need that system. If you're renting and you can only have a countertop system, then you're going to have to, that's a lot different for people. So, for example, I have a Berkey system because we're renting and it looks good, it's stainless steel, and it has activated alumina in it, which will take out the fluoride. I want the fluoride out of the water. So it's got activated alumina, which is the only other way you can really get the fluoride out if you don't have reverse osmosis. And it has some carbon filters in it as well to take out all the pesticides and everything else that's in there. So, there are quite a few different options. Some people get a whole house filtration system. Now, that's really good, but you wouldn't get reverse osmosis, obviously, for the whole house because the water for reverse osmosis moves really quickly through the filter media. Really slowly through the filter media. It takes ages, so you wouldn't be able to do that. You would get just sort of your basics and stop the chlorine and some of the heavy metals at the point of entry to the house, and then you would have a reverse osmosis system sort of at your tap.
You just brought up a good point about the whole house, because I do know some people that have shower filters because they don't want the hot air releasing certain toxins while we're showering. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend any shower filters? Yeah,
definitely. Again, if you've just got chlorine in your water, a shower filter is fantastic, like a KDF filter. KDF. Now, that's probably the best option for the shower. Unfortunately, if you have chloramines, that is not really, it'll get some of it out, but it's not going to get much of it out. Again, this is a problem. Now, the reason the KDF filter is probably the only filter that will work in the shower is because you've got the water moving so quickly over the filter media that it doesn't really have time to get much else out. So if they're making claims like it will get fluoride out or it will get, arsenic out or copper even, very unlikely. It's not going to get fluoride out. Because it's hot and it's moving quickly. So the KDF is your best option in that. If you've got chloramines, you're probably not even going to get much of that out either, unfortunately. It's a bit of a problem with that. But if you had a whole house system, you could be getting a lot more out at the beginning of the house at the point of entry, and then your KDF filter would be working a lot better in the shower. You can also get vitamin C filters, which are quite effective. And I think that there's even a couple of brands now that are doing sort of a combined KDF, vitamin C, and carbon filter together, which would be the best to get all that stuff out. But like you said, the chlorine, you're also breathing it in. When you're having a hot shower, you're getting a dose you're getting it all over your skin and in your body, where you're absorbing a lot of it. And I think 40 to 70% of your dose of chlorine is coming from being in it rather than drinking it. So you are getting a lot just from showering or bathing in that water, and then you are breathing it in as well. So yeah, definitely, if you can, get a shower filter. And they do need to be changed regularly. Unfortunately, they need to be changed about every 3 months or so. And the other problem with filters that we haven't mentioned is they can get bacteria on them too. So you've got to be very careful. I've tested people's water before, and they've had a reverse osmosis system, and they're like, smell this water, and why does it look this colour? And I'm like, yeah, you should not be drinking that. And then we test it, and it's filled with bacteria. And that's because they haven't been changing the filters regularly enough or properly, or it wasn't installed properly. So, you can have problems like that. And, that can make you very sick if you've got E. coli or something in your water, and you think you're doing the right thing filtering it. So there's no real perfect system. It's very difficult to sort of get it right, and that's why it's a case of finding out exactly what's in your water. You can go online and find out the water reports sort of annually, just see what contaminants are in your water, and realize when you're looking at that, they are not always, they only test for a certain number, 200 or 300 chemicals or something. There's a lot more in there that are just not tested for. So don't be fooled by going, oh, yeah, we're within all the standards of the Australian Drinking Water Guidelines and what have you, and nothing's been exceeded, and that's great. So our water is fine. And remember, they're testing every 3 months or so, so it's just a snapshot that they've chosen one day to test. And it comes out and it in with the Australian Drinking Water Guidelines, or whatever guidelines they're supposed to fit in with, depending on the country you're in. But you've got to understand that doesn't necessarily make it great. And a lot of these standards are set by not what's healthy. It's kind of just, they're more legal standards than health standards. So, look at that first, find out what's in your water, whether you've got chloramines or chlorine, that's a big one. Have you got fluoride? And then go from there and work out what the best system for you is going to be.
So, Jo, is it feasible to not worry about filtration and just to drink bottled water?
No, not really. Bottled water, look, that has its own set of problems. It's got phthalates in it, which are hormone disrupting chemicals. We do not want phthalates. Again, the plastic with the estrogenic effects. The microplastics are getting into the bottled water a lot of the time, because most of the time it's just filtered tap water. And, the plastic problem. It's just not, I would not recommend drinking bottled water at all. If you can, and look, I've spoken to people in certain parts of the world where their only option is bottled water, and they can get glass, bottled water in glasses. So in glass, which is a much better option if that's all you can do. It's not the cheapest option. But yeah, look, in general, bottled water is not an option. It's not the way to go. I think you would be better off using just your Brita or your Purge jug or something like that rather than bottled water, because it's basically the same type of thing that you will be drinking.
Yeah. What about alkaline water? What's that?
So alkaline water, there's a lot of hype about that at the moment. Basically what that is they're changing the pH a bit higher to about 8.8. Most tap water that we get, natural water is about 7, which is neutral, and most tap water is sort of a bit lower than that, maybe 6.7 or 6.5 or something. And there's all this hype about alkaline water, alkalizing the water, it's much better for your health and what have you. There's no real evidence to support that. And also I just don't, I think that's just a lot of hype really, because your stomach acid is one of the most acidic environments there is. And it's acidic for a reason, to kill bacteria and pathogens and to help you digest your food. So you don't necessarily want to dilute that. And just by drinking alkaline water, it's not going to change your blood pH, as far as I know. So look, I just don't think there's any need for that. I do think you need to remineralize your water if you have flat water, like once you've used reverse osmosis or distillation, then you would need to remineralize it and bring those minerals back up. But this alkaline water fad, I don't think it's I just don't see that there's any health benefits, and I haven't seen any signs to prove that yet. So I mean, maybe, but I just don't think it's necessary. And a lot of these alkaline water, you say, oh, it alkalizes your water, but it's not actually filtering anything out. It's just adding in more of the, calcium, magnesium, or whatever. And you're still getting some of those contaminants in a lot of the alkaline water. So, yeah, I don't think that's the best option either.
Wow, Jo, this has been so insightful. I always love speaking with you because you are a wealth of knowledge. Ladies, if you've enjoyed today, Jo is joining me back at the Menopause Makeover. This is my online program. Enrollments start this weekend, and I have a very special early bird special for the women on my waitlist only. So if the program does interest you, join the waitlist. I will be running the first month, which is on nutrition. Jo will be running the second month, which is all on environmental health, and you can ask her all your water filtration questions and more. And I will be running the third month, looking at lifestyle medicine for menopause as well. For more information, go to my website. But Jo, thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to seeing you inside the Menopause Makeover program.
Always a pleasure, Jen. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Menopause Natural Solutions. This podcast contains general information about menopause. It is provided as a guide and is not intended to replace medical advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a 5-star review.